3 true stories that started normal and ended in the unthinkable, the tourniquet deal. They say real horror doesn't always come from shadows. Sometimes it comes from timing, from coincidence, from the one moment in your life when someone else decides whether you get to keep breathing. El Paso, Texas. June 29, 1934. Captain Alan Falby was not the kind of cop who backed off. He was 37, stubborn, proud of the badge, and even more proud of the police motorcycle growling under him. It was late afternoon when he spotted a pickup truck tearing down the road way over the limit. He hit the siren, leaned forward, and opened the throttle. Most drivers panic when they see red and blue in the mirror. Not this one. The truck just kept going. Falby locked in. 11 years on the job had burned something into him. You don't quit the chase. So he stayed on that truck, engine screaming, wind hammering his face. He hated runners. Hated it. That's when the pickup did something he didn't expect. Without warning, the driver slammed the brakes and cut left. Falby didn't have time. His motorcycle smashed into the back of the truck. The world snapped sideways into metal and asphalt. The bike launched. Falby launched with it. He hit the street and slid. He felt the road eat through his uniform and into his skin. He felt the shock punch his lungs empty. He felt himself bounce, grind, slow, stop. Then he felt the weight. His own motorcycle, almost 500 pounds of steel, crashed down on his legs and pinned him to the pavement. He tried to suck in air and could barely do it. The pain in his legs lit up so bright it was almost white. Somewhere in his mind, he expected the driver of the truck to get out and help. The truck didn't stop. The driver just fled. He left a bleeding cop under a wrecked bike in the middle of the street and ran to save himself. Falby screamed for help. No one answered. He tried lifting the bike. He couldn't. Every tiny movement shoved more focused pressure into his legs and made the pain spike so hard he thought he'd pass out. And then he saw something that brought a new kind of fear, not physical, but final. Blood. There was a fast-growing pool of it spreading under him and running down the street. He looked down and saw why. His upper leg, just above the knee, had been ripped wide open. Not a cut. A tear. A deep, open gash pouring blood like a faucet had snapped off. This wasn't a wait for the ambulance injury. This was a "you've got minutes" injury. He knew it. And alone, stuck under the bike, unable to move, he understood what that meant. This might be it. He called out again, weaker now. And somebody answered. 2 men had seen the whole chase from down the road, the lights, the crash, the way the truck bailed afterward. They pulled over and ran to him. They didn't ask questions. They didn't panic. They just acted. Together they heaved the motorcycle up and off his legs and dragged it away far enough to free him. And that's when they all saw the wound clearly. The gash above his knee was so bad you could see inside. Falby's head swam. His skin went cold. The light around him felt wrong, too bright at the edges, the way it gets when you're about to black out. He knew what blood loss feels like. He could feel himself fading. One of the men dropped to his knees beside him, already working. "Stay with me," he told the captain. Calm. Controlled. The other man sprinted to the side of the road, grabbed a thick broken branch from under a tree, and came running back. The first guy reached down and yanked at Falby's uniform collar. The captain was still wearing his formal necktie. The man slid it off fast, wrapped it high and tight around Falby's thigh, above the wound, and knotted it hard. Then he took the stick. He threaded the stick through the tie and started twisting. The tie cinched. Then cinched again. And again. With every turn, the pressure crushed down on the artery feeding the wound. The blood slowed. Then it stopped. Captain Falby screamed through his teeth. But he didn't bleed out. The 2 men had just built a field tourniquet with nothing but a necktie, a stick, and the will not to let a stranger die on the street. By the time help finally arrived and Falby was hauled into an ambulance, he was ghost pale and barely conscious, but alive. At the hospital the doctors told him something cold and direct. If those two men hadn't made that tourniquet, he would have been dead in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's all he had left. He kept repeating that number in his head. 10 minutes. Fast forward 4 years. December 12, 1938. Captain Falby is healed. Scarred, but back on duty, patrolling in El Paso like always. His life went on. He didn't quit. He didn't retire. He just got back on the bike. That afternoon, he got a call: bad car wreck on Route 80. He sped to the scene. A sedan had left the road and crumpled into a tree. Steam hissed from the hood. Glass everywhere. The driver was still slumped in the seat, not moving. Falby ditched his bike and ran. He pulled the man out of the car and laid him on the ground. The guy was limp, barely breathing, and bleeding fast from, of all places, a deep slice in his leg. Same spot. Same kind of wound. Falby didn't freeze. He'd seen this before. No time to wait for medics. He ripped off his own tie. He grabbed a sturdy stick from the roadside. He wrapped, threaded, twisted. Tight. Tighter. Tighter. The bleeding slowed. Then stopped. He kept pressure and watched this stranger's chest. In. Out. In. Out. Still alive. When the ambulance finally arrived and took over, the paramedics said the same exact thing the other doctors had said to him 4 years earlier. He was maybe 10 minutes from bleeding out. Falby just nodded. Then he really looked at the man's face. And felt the world tilt. It wasn't a stranger. The man lying on the ground, the one whose life he had just saved with a tie, a stick, and a memory of pain, was the same man who had once knelt over him in the street and done the exact same thing. The same man who refused to let him die. The same man who walked up out of nowhere, watched a cop bleed out in the road, and said, "Not today." Now it had come back around. Same injury. Same method. Same 2 lives. Different side of the tourniquet. Later, when reporters asked Captain Falby about it, about the crazy coincidence, about whether he felt like some kind of hero, he just said one line. "One good tourniquet deserves another." He meant, you saved me. I saved you. Debt paid. Story closed. But the truth is, that story wasn't closed. It was just beginning. Because sometimes the most dangerous part of a story is when people decide what they're willing to do for someone they care about. The elevator. Love makes you feel safe. Obsession makes you feel owned. Hong Kong. December 16, 1984. It was late, and the apartment complex wasn't the kind of place you felt comfortable walking alone at night. The buildings were old. Concrete walls, flickering hallway lights, elevators that sounded like they were held together with wire and prayers. The kind of place where you learn to listen to footsteps behind you, just in case. Haran knew that. That's why every night he walked his girlfriend home. He and you had just finished dinner at his place, a cheap little unit in one wing of the complex. He held her hand as they crossed the open courtyard toward her building on the far side. Laundry hung on lines from the balconies. Radios mumbled through thin walls. Somewhere above them, a couple was yelling. He always walked her to the door. It was their routine. They reached the entrance. You punched in her floor number like she'd done 1,000 times. He pressed the elevator call button. They waited. The building had 2 elevators, and both of them were a problem. They were old metal boxes that rattled, scraped, and banged their way up and down the shaft, like the cables were chewing through the walls. You could feel the whole car shiver when it moved. Either of them liked riding it. Either of them liked the stairs more. The elevator finally banged to a stop, and the doors slid open just slightly off track. Empty. They stepped in together and hit 13. The doors shook closed. The car began crawling up. The ride was slow and tense. No one spoke. You could hear the elevator dragging itself along the inside of the building, like metal was being pulled against bone. Every few seconds there was a heavy clunk that made both of them quietly flinch. Floor 4. Floor 8. Floor 11. Then finally ding. Floor 13. The doors opened, and they stepped out. Solid ground. Relief. They walked together down the hallway to use unit. He kissed her goodnight in the doorway and told her to lock up. She smiled at him. She always pretended she wasn't scared of this neighborhood. He always pretended he believed her. Then she went inside. And Harran turned around and walked back toward the elevator. He pressed down. The doors opened. Again empty. He stepped in alone. He pressed lobby. The doors closed. And then, for the first time that night, he was alone in a box he didn't trust. The car began dropping. Floor 12. Floor 11. Floor 10. The sounds of the city faded and were replaced by the coughing metal of the shaft. He kept his hands on the wall to steady himself as the car shook and rattled. He just wanted to get out, cross the courtyard, and go home. Floor 9. Floor 8. Floor 7. Slam. The elevator jerked hard and stopped so violently it almost knocked him off his feet. He grabbed the railing and froze. Okay, he thought. Someone on 7 called it. Doors will open. No problem. But the doors didn't open. He waited. Nothing. Instead, the entire car dropped again, not a full floor, just a sudden lurch down, like something snapped. Then it locked again, halfway between floors. That's when he felt the first real spike of panic. This wasn't inconvenience stuck. This was wrong. He pressed the buttons. Nothing. He hit open door. Nothing. He hit the emergency button. Nothing. And then something else changed. The air. He smelled something. Not smoke at first. Not exactly. It was chemical. Oily. Sharp in the back of his throat. He frowned. Looked down. And his brain stalled. The floor of the elevator was on fire. Actual flames had started licking across the cheap carpet near his shoes, then racing outward across the floor. For a second, he didn't move. He couldn't. The shock was too big, too fast. Then he felt the heat grab him. Fire crawled up his pant legs and bit into his skin. He screamed. He stomped. He tried to smother the flames with his hands. It didn't matter. The flames weren't spreading naturally. This felt like someone had just dumped fuel across the floor and lit a match. Because that's exactly what had happened. Up above him, on top of the stuck elevator car, a man was waiting. Not a stranger. Not a mugger. A friend. Someone both he and you trusted. Someone who had introduced them to each other. Someone who did not want them together. His name was Lou. To you he was the kind friend who helped us meet. To himself, he was the one who believed you belonged to him, and that Harran had stolen her. So Lou made a plan. He watched them from a distance that night. He waited until you was home safe and Harran got back into the elevator alone. Then he quietly went to the building's breaker panel and cut the power to that single car at the perfect moment, freezing it between floors. He knew that would trap Harran. Then he climbed on top of the elevator in the dark. He pried the emergency hatch just enough to pour liquid fuel, kerosene, straight down onto Harran without being seen. That chemical smell, Harran noticed? That was his warning. But he didn't understand it in time. Lou dropped a lit match. When the fire caught and surged up, Harran did the only thing a human body does at that level of panic: it fought to live. He looked up. Most old elevators have an escape hatch in the ceiling. He spotted it, and clawed his way up the side railing through heat and smoke, forcing the square metal panel open with his shoulder. He pushed his head and shoulders through the hatch and sucked in air. For half a second, he thought he was safe. Then he saw a face. Lou. It didn't make sense at first. Why Lou was there, why Lou looked like that, why Lou was holding something in his hand. Then the pain came white and shocking. Lou didn't try to warn him. He didn't try to pull him out. He attacked. Up on top of the elevator, above the burning box, in the dark narrow shaft, Lou stabbed him. The attack was fast, violent, direct. It wasn't a fight. It was an ambush. And after that first hit, Lou didn't stop. He dragged Haran up and out of the hatch, and then did something that tells you exactly what this really was. He threw him. Not out into the hallway. Not onto a landing. Down. He shoved him straight off the top of the elevator car, into the open shaft. 7 floors of nothing below. Impact. Silence. In the hallway upstairs, you dried her hands and went to the window. It was a sweet little habit she had. After every good night, she'd watch. She'd wait for him to come back out of her building and cross the courtyard so she could see him one last time before bed. Except tonight, he didn't appear. 1 minute passed. 3. 5. 7. Her stomach turned cold. She knew those elevators. She hated those elevators. And she knew his timing. He should have been outside already. Something was wrong. You left her apartment and hurried down the hallway toward the elevator bank. Above every elevator door, there was a little red number showing what floor each car was on. One of them was moving normally. The other one said 7. Then 7 started blinking. Then it froze. Her chest got tight. That's him, she thought. He's stuck. She called the fire department. By the time firefighters arrived, they weren't rushing. People get stuck in elevators all the time. Annoying, not deadly. They took the stairs to the 7th floor and forced the elevator doors open with tools. That's when everything changed. Because the elevator car wasn't aligned with the 7th floor. It was partway down, stuck between floors, jammed between 7 and 6. And smoke was seeping up out of the dark. They could smell burned fabric. They could also smell fuel. They leaned in and saw something they were not expecting to see in a stuck elevator. The floor of the car was scorched black. Heat damage everywhere. The emergency hatch in the roof was open. And there was blood inside the car. On the floor. On the walls. Splashed up toward the open hatch. This wasn't a malfunction. This was a crime scene. They shined their flashlights down past the car, into the shaft. That's when they saw him. A man, badly hurt, crouched on a tiny metal service lip 1 floor below. Bleeding. Shaking. Barely able to sit upright. Burned. Clothes torn. An ankle bent wrong. They thought they'd found Haran. They were wrong. They pulled him out on the 6th floor and laid him out on the hallway tile. He was in shock, barely talking, but awake. You ran down the stairs to meet them. She saw the man on the stretcher. And she froze in place. Her voice came out small, confused, then certain. That's not my boyfriend. In that moment, the whole thing stopped being an accident. This wasn't mechanical failure. This wasn't bad wiring. This wasn't bad luck. This was planned. Cold. Personal. And the real victim, the person who should have been lying on that stretcher, was gone. He was still in the dark. The truth in the shaft. When they carried the injured man out of the elevator, everyone thought the nightmare was over. But what you saw lying on that stretcher wasn't safety. It was deceit made real. The man the firefighters saved wasn't Haran. It was Lou. The friend. The one who'd smiled at their dinners. Who'd laughed at their stories. Who'd introduced them like he was doing a good deed. He wasn't supposed to be there. And now he was the only one alive. The investigation. Yu's scream echoed through the hallway. The firefighters froze, the medics turned. Her voice cracked as she kept saying it. That's not him, that's not him. Until the shock of it reached everyone standing there. Police were called immediately. Within an hour, detectives had sealed off the 6th and 7th floors. The air smelled of burnt plastic, metal dust, and something chemical. The elevator shaft became the center of everything. They found Haran's body 7 floors below. Broken. Burned. His shirt soaked in blood, but his hands were torn open, scraped raw like he tried to climb, tried to fight, tried to hold on. He had stab wounds. That one detail changed everything. A mechanical failure couldn't stab a man. Someone did this. And the only person who could have been close enough in that impossible place was the one who came out alive, Lou. The confession. At first, Lou didn't speak. He stayed in the hospital, leg in a cast, pretending to be a survivor too traumatized to explain. But detectives in Hong Kong don't leave gaps in their logic. They retraced every second of the night. They checked the electrical box in the basement. Someone had manually cut power to one of the elevators. The timing matched perfectly with when Haran got inside. That meant it wasn't random. It was deliberate. They searched Lou's apartment. Found Yu's photo on his bedside table. Another one hidden in a drawer. Letters he'd written but never sent. Whole pages that shifted from love to anger to hate in the space of one paragraph. He'd written one line over and over again near the end of a page. "If I can't have her, he won't either." When confronted, Lou cracked. The words came out in a trembling flood. He admitted he'd been obsessed for years, ever since he'd introduced them in college. He watched them together, saw how Haran made you laugh, how easy it was for them. He said it wasn't fair. He said he was the one meant for her. He planned it for weeks. Studied the breaker box. Waited for the right night when both of them would take the elevator. But when you got off at the 13th floor and Haran went back down alone, he saw his moment. He poured kerosene through the escape hatch. He wanted Haran to burn. But when Haran climbed up through the fire, something inside Lou snapped completely. He stabbed him. And then, he pushed him. 7 floors down. He only survived because, in his panic after the attack, he jumped down onto one of the narrow metal platforms that lined each floor's elevator door, trying to fake being another victim. He shattered his ankle but lived. He thought he could play the part of a hero gone wrong. He thought you would pity him. Instead, she stared at him in silence when the confession was read in court. The sentence. Hong Kong's newspapers called it the elevator murder. It was the kind of story that didn't just shock, it haunted. How could someone turn friendship into that kind of violence? Lou was sentenced to life in prison. He never apologized to you directly. In interviews later, he said he didn't remember lighting the fire, that it was like something else took control. But people who knew him said he remembered everything. The aftermath. You never took another elevator again. For the rest of her life, she used stairs no matter how high the floor was. She moved out of that apartment complex and left Hong Kong within a year. The building stood for decades afterward. Residents whispered about strange noises, burning smells in the shaft, a flicker of movement in the reflection of the elevator doors. Some said they heard the sound of metal twisting, like something heavy falling through the dark. But it wasn't a haunting. It was memory, echoing through a place that had once trapped two people between love and obsession. Because every tragedy leaves behind its sound. And in that building, it still sounded like an elevator that never reached the lobby.